I'm Brenda Siegel, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. First and foremost, actually, we need to have a mask mandate. We know that people are in the neighborhood of 70% more likely to transmit the disease if we don't have masks. So the fact that we haven't done a mask mandate yet is really what it says to people, workers in our state, is that we aren't trying to protect your lives, but you have to wear a mask, workers, to protect ours. And that's not really okay. We have to make sure that we are creating policies that protect everyone. In addition to that, we need to make sure that when we go back to school, that it's done in a safe and secure way, and that we've brought teachers, parents, and students to the table to make sure that that all of those concerns are addressed as well. So the work that I've done for the last 9 years has been a long-term economic driver following Tropical Storm Irene that uses creative economic principles. I believe we need to go into each and every community and work with town governments and businesses on the ground, along with whatever resources exist there. So in our area, it was arts, recreation, and agriculture. And we need to connect them to our businesses and our town government and the people, and make sure that we're creating a way to drive the economy. And then identify the resources that we will need from Montpelier, from the federal government, and make sure that we give folks the tools they need to advocate for those resources, and then help to get them there as well. So we're not going back to the economy we were in 6 months ago. There is no 6 months ago. And furthermore, we shouldn't even want to, because 6 months ago, people were freezing in tents. 6 months ago, families like my own had trouble feeding their children already. 6 months ago, we were not in a good place either. The reason that we fell apart so quickly was because our economy already wasn't built on a stable foundation. And if we want to really do better through COVID, we have to build better out of COVID. And that means making sure that we have a strong foundation. If our house crumbled that quickly, we'd build a new foundation, and we need to do the same thing with our economy. Well, right now, I actually would say that we've done a fairly decent job of making sure that there are the food drops. Depending on where you live, though, this is somewhat, and whether or not you have access to transportation, because where I live, for example, the local food shelf does deliver food to folks who can't get there during the pandemic. However, that wasn't true before. And so what we really need to think about is how are we going to make sure people have food throughout the pandemic and afterwards. I also would say making sure that the food that we're distributing is healthy food, so that we're not also creating health problems along with people's desperation and need to eat. So we've done a really good job of making sure people have dairy, making sure people have vegetables. I think we need to do a little more making sure people have protein that isn't just fried food. But we have to do more, and especially in areas where there are not the same kind of resources as there are in the Brattleboro area or in the Burlington area for food security. Climate change is one of the most major issues we have in this state and across the country and world. We need to build an overarching framework that includes climate change and brings forth racial and economic justice to ensure that we are addressing the issues that come along with climate change, which is that the most deeply marginalized are the most deeply impacted by this crisis. And while we've been in this crisis for the pandemic time, we've been in a climate crisis for quite some time. And what we've seen throughout the pandemic is that when science dictates that we must change our behavior, we do know how. And we need to do the same exact thing for climate change. And that means taking bold climate action. That means strong transportation initiatives, passing TCI, of course, but also hitting some of the low-hanging fruit around improving our transportation system. In addition, we have to make sure that we have strong weatherization initiatives that also reach low-income and moderate-income households. In addition, we definitely need to work on a renewable energy sources. And again, we need to make sure that that's hitting the low income and the moderate income folks in a way that they can use it meaningfully, or else we're not actually solving the climate crisis. Yes, we are in the top 5 in our country for racial disparities in our prison system. 1 in 14 Black men will end up in jail in their lifetime. We have an enormous amount of traffic stops that are disproportionate for Black and brown folks in our state, not to mention the hate that I think has been very public actually across the state, but we still are saying we don't have this major problem here, but we actually do, and in some ways worse than other places. And so we need to address it, and we need to address it, yes, by defunding police and transferring those funds, reallocating them into the most impacted communities, into mental health resources, into social service resources, and into other types of resources that have been underfunded and that deeply impact those same communities as well. But also some of it has to go directly into those communities. We also have to, as a state government and our town governments, have to actively and intentionally reach out to communities of color and try to change the diversity of our hiring places, and work on, in schools, we have a very high suspension rate as well for people of color, so especially young children. And so if we want to do all of that meaningful work, the very first thing we have to do is, us as white people, we have to make sure that we are addressing our own bias, our own internal bias, and then we need to talk to our immediate circles. And then when we're passing legislation, we need to make sure that we're asking, who does this legislation harm and who does it hurt? And if we can't get the right answers out of that, then we need to go back and try harder, because it isn't okay for us to continue to allow this problem to go on for any more time. I have been using the word transformative justice of late because I believe that we need to move away from the system of punishment and move towards a system that truly keeps our communities safe. Because right now our communities are not actually being kept safer by the system we have. In fact, in Addison County, when Dennis Wigman, the state's attorney there, when he stopped putting people in jail, the crime rates went down. So the work that we can do around mental health, for example, the work that we can do around our systemic bias, the work that we absolutely must do around the overdose crisis, that all of that work is ultimately going to both make our communities safer, and it's going to reduce the amount of time that people spend interacting with police and prisons. And both of those things need to happen for us to get anywhere with this crisis, because what we believed about the system of punishment, how we believed it functioned and worked, we've seen over and over again that it doesn't function and work. So the work that we're going to need to do is really an overhaul. And we've started that with the large criminal justice reform bill that passed this year, but we're going to have to do a lot more work than that. So there's been a lot of proposals over the years, as I'm sure many are aware, and I favor a collaboration of multiple proposals. So I think that we can work on our fiber optic as well. In addition, to increasing our fiber, I believe that communication districts are going to be a huge piece of the puzzle for Vermont. And we've started that work already in the Barrie area. We've started that work in the southern part of the state already. And I do think we have to really build on that work and have robust communication districts across the state. And then in addition, I support the idea of having also communication centers as well, so that when I live in an area where the internet fails often, I think it's become somewhat famous or infamous during this campaign because I keep getting dropped out during forums. But when that happens, when it's not working, there has to be somewhere for folks to go where they're going to be able to finish their homework, or they're going to be able to finish their work. And I think having that stopgap measure of having a communication center in most areas would be a very a benefit to our, especially our rural communities. So the first thing that we have to do in order to make this state more attractive is we need to catch up to the states around us. So by 2023, all the states around us except New Hampshire are going to have a $15 an hour minimum wage and paid family and medical leave. We are not going to have that. Why would you choose? Our state's gorgeous and beautiful, but why, as a young family, why are you going to choose Vermont, or you're trying to have a young family, if you can have a better opportunity somewhere else. In addition, we need to make sure that we're building a green economy, because a green economy also is a signal to better and stronger opportunities in our state, especially for our lowest income workers. And once we do that, then we also increase our revenue span in the state government. Because right now, the folks who are making the least are getting a check back at the end of the year, instead of paying in the same way that they would if we were to increase minimum wage, if we were to have strong, secure opportunity with good income. We also need to make sure that we are solving our issues with homelessness and healing the overdose crisis. We have to make sure that we are taking care of our people, because when we are taking care of our people, that is a sign that we are actually a strong state. And what I know about Vermont, I lost everything in Tropical Storm Irene. What I know about Vermont and during this pandemic, people come together to help each other, but we can't just do that during crisis. We need to be doing it all the time, because all the time there are people experiencing crisis, and we have to do that then as well.